What's up, y'all? It's your boy Ace. This is Fantasize Football. Welcome back to the channel. We here once again with some more fantasy football content for y'all. I hope y'all have been enjoying all the videos and whatnot. We're here again today to discuss some players that I was out on last season that I'm back in on this season. Whether it be because I was I just wasn't feeling them at all. I was lower than ECR and ADP on these players, or I should say, lower than, or a combination of things. I needed some proof, but we'll get into that. I'll kind of explain that more. But before we talk about that, I did want to quickly say thank you to everyone that's been showing love and support. It really means the world to me, like I say all the time. But yeah, I'm having a blast doing this shit. I hope you guys are loving it too. And if you are, let me know down in the comments. I really like it. And if you aren't subscribed to the channel and you're loving the content, subscribe to the channel, man. It really helps. And turn on them bells so you can get notified when a new video is coming out. But without further ado, let's kick it off. Let's get right into it. Talking about some players that I was off on last season that I'm back in on for the 2021 NFL season for fantasy football. So we're going to kick it off first with none other than Amari Cooper, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, last season, I was off of Amari Cooper because of how I kind of viewed him. I've always viewed Amari Cooper, and rightfully so, as a very kind of boom-bust player, not the best PPR guy, just inconsistent, right? And that's not like the type of player I'm targeting, at least early on in drafts. I want guys that are kind of more steady. You know, I'd rather have a guy that gives me 14 to 16 PPR points a week than a guy that's going to give me 3 points one week and 50 points the next week, because you never know what's going to happen, right? They got an easy, soft matchup coming up, and you're like, oh, this is perfect. Let me slap him into the lineup. Maybe he's going to drop a 50, win me a week, and then they give you a 3, right? And then they're playing, one of the top defenses in the league, and you say, well, gave me 3 points last week. Let me sit him down on my bench, play somebody else, and then they blow up for 50 points. And, obviously that can win you a week, but it can also lose you a week. And me, especially early on, I'd rather go for steady production, like I said. But with that being said, let's look at this a little more, because I'm going to kind of show you guys, where this comes from and why I felt this way and why most people felt this way about Amari Cooper. We're going to bring back the phone machine, all right? So let's look at 2018 first, all right? So 2018 PPR fantasy points per game for Amari Cooper, 14.7. Not bad, right? Pretty good. We like to see that. But when you look at it game by game, you start seeing where this comes from and where this kind of stink that Amari Cooper had on him had originally came from. So game by game, 22.6 points, 14.4 points. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. That was 2019. 2018 first. 2.8 points, so starts the season off with a dud. 21.6 points, 3.7, 26.8, 2, 0, 16.8, 13.5, 6.6, 38, 13.5, 48.7, 8.3, 6, and 6.1. So you see right there, the highs are very high, but the lows, man, there's a 0 in there. It's just like you never know what to expect. But then 2019 comes around, right? And I'll discuss this a little more after I go through all these. But 2019 PPR fantasy points per game, 15.1 a game. Again, pretty good, right? But then you look at the game by game. 22.6, 14.4, 26.8, 9.8, 39.6. So an excellent start to the season, right? Only one game below 10 PPR points. But then right after that follows it up with a 1.3, 15.6, 18, 31.7, 6.8, 0, 16.5, 20.3, 2.9, 6.4, 13.2, right? So kind of starts picking it up here. But again, like I said, I'll kind of talk about this after I go through all of these. So let's go on to 2020, right? So 2020 PPR fantasy points per game, 15 even, right? But this is where we really see a change in what happened. And obviously, a lot of last season, he wasn't playing with Dak. He was playing with Andy Dalton, Benny DiNucci, whoever they could pull off the street. You know what I mean? So I am expecting more this season, more of what we saw last season. But before we even get into that, let me just go through the game by game. 18.1, 16, 17.6, 31.4, 7.3, 21.9, 15.5, 1.5, 12.5, 14, 23.2, 16.3, 15.1, 2.7, 16.7, and 10.1. So you go and you look. The big stink, it originally comes from 2018, where 8 out of 15 of Amari Cooper's game, he scored below 10 PPR fantasy points, which is not good. And in 7 of those games, he scored less than 7 PPR fantasy points. And that's the kind of stuff that will lose you your weeks. Yes. Will he have weeks that win you a week all on his own? Yes, he will. He'll put you over the edge sometimes. But like I had said before, man, that's not what I'm into for an early round pick, right? But then 2019, he starts becoming a little more consistent, showing a little more consistency, still having those boom weeks, but the lows weren't as frequent, at least. So he only had 6 games below 10 PPR fantasy points, and then in 2020, he only had 3 games below 10 PPR fantasy points, where he really started to show that consistency. He did still have some big boom games, some 30-plus point games, 25-plus point games, but for the most part, he was really consistent, kind of giving you that 14 to 16 points a week where you can feel comfortable putting him in your lineup and knowing that he's going to produce. And obviously, like I said, Dak is going to be back this season. I expect Dak to come back healthy and bounce back. And with that being said, man, I'm expecting a big year out of Amari Cooper as well. I do still expect him to be the number 1 target in this offense. I know CeeDee Lamb really showed some flashes last season. He was really good last year. But I do still expect Cooper to be the number 1. They just signed him to a big extension. And there's going to be ample opportunity in this offense for like the volume to go around. So this is the type of offense that can support, 2-3 relevant fantasy receivers without really question, without a problem. So I'm not too worried about that, to be honest with you. I'm expecting more of what we saw last season with Dak being more consistent, being a relatively safe floor guy with the upside to really boom. And I'm looking at him as a solid high-end wide receiver 2 for this season. And one of the guys that I'm really happy with, if I go, 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds and get a tight end in the third, locking in as my number 1 receiver in the 4th round. That's cool with me. I'm fine with that if we keep seeing what we saw last season from Amari Cooper. But let's move on from Amari Cooper to a running back, Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. So in 2019, I loved Nick Chubb. I was all over him. I wanted him everywhere. But Kareem Hunt wasn't there for the majority of the season. For the first half of the season, he was suspended. And he came back and he started kind of like outproducing Chubb, at least from a fantasy standpoint in a lot of games, kind of outscoring him in PPR a lot of time. So last season, I got a little nervous on Chubb, right? And if you wanted Chubb, you had to pay first-round draft capital in order to get him. And I just wasn't sure that I was willing to do that just because I was concerned that with Kareem Hunt there might not be enough volume to support both of them being, high-end fantasy assets, at least in Chubb's case where he was being drafted as a first-round player. But he did prove me wrong. There is a lot of volume to go around in this offense. They do love to run the ball, and he was a bit on and off the field. He did have suffer from some injuries last season, but when he was on the field, he was great for the most part. In 8 of 12 games, he scored over 15 PPR fantasy points, which is great. We love to see that. A solid, safe floor, 15 points. You put him in your lineup, you set it, you forget it. He isn't really as involved in the passing game, but he makes up for it with volume in the run game and mega efficiency. He's never been below 5 yards a carry in his career, although his career is relatively short, but he's always been super, super efficient. And I'm back in 2021. I seen it with my own 2 eyes. I saw what Nick Chubb can be last season, and I do believe that this offense, the Browns can support 2 fantasy relevant running backs that, in Chubb's case, even a back end RB1. He's the type of cat that I'm even okay with drafting late in the first round if I'm on the turn, getting him as my second running back. Yeah, I'm okay with doing that, man. I'm back in on Nick Chubb. I believe, even if the volume in the receiving game isn't really there, I think he'll make up for it with touchdowns, with efficiency, and with volume on the ground. But moving on from Nick Chubb, we're going to move back over to another wide receiver, and I know that I'm in the minority here. I know I am, and it's A.J. Brown, wide receiver, Tennessee Titans. Now, I know a lot of people really loved A.J. Brown after his rookie season, but for me, I was just a little nervous. I thought he needed to kind of prove it. I thought he was a great football player, right? But I just looked at the Titans offense, right? And you got Derrick Henry, obviously, as like the first option on the offense altogether, right? Kind of the focal point of the team, not a very high pass volume team. And A.J. Brown, I was just kind of looking at the type of cat that needed to get you 100 yards or a touchdown in order for you to really be happy with starting him. You know, because I just didn't see him as like a big PPR guy getting a lot of catches and whatnot. But he kind of like, not kind of, he proved me wrong last season. He really did, man. He proved it to me. Excuse me. Because like I was saying, I kind of looked at him kind of like how I looked at Amari Cooper as a boom bust type of guy. And last season, he had only 3 out of the 14 games he played with less than 7 targets, which is good volume, 106 targets in 14 games, which is 17 game pace of 129 targets. And then what we saw in the offseason this year for the Titans was that obviously they let Corey Davis and Jonnu Smith walk, right? And they replaced them with Josh Reynolds in free agency, who's a guy from the Rams that did show some flashes, but has never been, shown to be like he's never had the opportunity to really be a 2 in the offense. So we don't really know what's going to happen there. I don't expect him to really take away from A.J. Brown very much. But yeah, and then they added Dez Fitzpatrick in the draft, who's a guy that I'm really not too familiar with, but I don't expect either of these guys to really take away from A.J. Brown. But yeah, man, like when I look at this team, when I look at A.J. Brown, it's like there is upside for like 140, 150 targets. And if A.J. Brown gets 140, 150 targets, then it's night. See you later. Goodbye. I'm going to be scared to play against him. And I don't know how much of A.J. Brown I'm going to get because I am a very big advocate of going with 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds. But A.J. Brown's one of those players that may make me deviate away from that strategy a little bit. Like, especially if I have like an early first round pick, right? Like if I'm picking in that 1 to 3 range, right? And say you're at 1 and you got 2 picks in a row and A.J. Brown's there, I'm hitting the draft button every single time. I'm not even thinking twice about it. But yeah, even if I'm picking like 3rd and I got a few picks to go and there's a few running backs I like and A.J. Brown's still there, he's kind of like a tier breaker for me. I see that the upside is the moon. He showed last season that he's going to command targets and he should be relatively safe and consistent as long as he can stay healthy. So he proved it to me, man, and I am back in on A.J. Brown for the 2021 NFL Fantasy Football season. And we're going to cap this off with our last player, and it is another running back, Green Bay Packers, Aaron Jones. A lot of question marks with Aaron Jones in this offseason. Where the Packers going to re-sign him? But they shelled out a big deal for him. It's good to see that for a running back, man. You don't get to see it too often. Only the real studs get it, and Aaron Jones is a stud. He deserves it. And I do feel like I do have to preface this, like I've been saying with anyone I talk about with the Packers. Obviously, this has a lot to do with Aaron Rodgers. And I do think, personally, Aaron Rodgers is going to stick around. But if Aaron Rodgers goes, then everyone on the Packers kind of just falls with him. And I did hear some talk that the Packers are working on an extension with Aaron Rodgers. They did sign Blake Bortles. But if you think that them signing Blake Bortles means that Aaron Rodgers is going to leave, then I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't change anything for me. I feel like they brought in Bortles because they were talking about how they felt like Jordan Love wasn't really ready anyway, so they wanted to just add a little depth to their quarterback room. So that's what they did with Bortles. A veteran guy that can kind of like, God forbid anything happens to Aaron Rodgers, step in and play. But with that out of the way, Aaron Jones, man, he carried a few of my teams in 2019, as I'm sure he did for some of you guys as well. He was great. He's an absolute beast. He had 19 total touchdowns on 285 touches, which is incredible. Always been a hyper-efficient player, but I was expecting some regression. in 2020. And maybe I was expecting too much regression because I wasn't like out on Aaron Jones, but I just had a lot of other running backs ahead of him. And based on like ADP and ECR, I was a lot lower than Aaron Jones than a lot of people were. I just couldn't see him coming close to that 19 total touchdowns that he did with like similar or less volume. And then Jamal Williams was still there, and they had drafted A.J. Dillon. So I just wasn't sure how to really feel about this. How involved is A.J. Dillon going to be? How involved is Jamal Williams going to keep his role? Is Aaron Jones' role going to kind of regress even further? And if that's the case and he's getting even less touches, although he is very efficient, there's no way that he's going to be able to replicate or come close to 19 touchdowns. But if I'm correct, man, he still put up last season 13 total touchdowns. So there was some regression there, but he was hyper efficient with his touches. A.J. Dillon was barely involved for the majority of the season. I was nervous, man. Aaron Jones never had a 300 total touch season, but he came out and he put it together. And I don't know, man. I just looked at him last season as like a mid to low end RB2, and God, I couldn't have been more wrong. I remember in one of my leagues, and I drafted Kenyon Drake before Aaron Jones in a half PPI league. Man, do I regret that? But anyways, I was right to a certain extent. I'm sorry. It was 11 touchdowns, not 13 last season that he had. Yeah, 11 total touchdowns, I believe. But like I had said, he only played 14 games. So on a 16-game pace, that was like 13 touchdowns. But the volume was nearly identical. A.J. Dillon wasn't really involved. He had 248 total touches in 2020. 16-game pace of 283 touches. So I think the year before that, I said he had 285 in 2019. So like literally identical. And now I'm back in 2021 on Aaron Jones. One, because he's proven time and time again, he's hyper efficient. He is going to score. He's going to be heavily involved in the offense. But then on top of that, Jamal Williams is out of town. So now it's just Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And while I do expect A.J. Dillon to be more involved in the offense this season, I expect Aaron Jones to kind of pick up what he leaves to A.J. Dillon in the run game, on the ground game, in the receiving game. Because Jamal Williams played on a lot of those 2-minute drills. He was a very good passing down guy. And I expect Aaron Jones, who is also a great receiver out of the backfield, to kind of take over that role. And while A.J. Dillon may vulture some touchdowns from him and whatnot, I can see Aaron Jones kind of making up for the lack of touchdowns and maybe the lack of the volume on the ground in the receiving game. So for me right now, if Aaron Rodgers sticks around, I got Aaron Jones as a high-end RB1. Well, I should say more like a mid-end RB1. I think I actually have him at RB6 on the dot. Obviously, if Aaron Rodgers leaves, that will change. But as of right now, with Aaron Rodgers there, Aaron Jones is a guy that I am definitely back in on for 2021. And I hope all of y'all are too. But that's all I got for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, leave a like, comment, let me know who's some guys that you were out on last year that you're back in 2021. What you think of my takes here. Tell me, go ahead, knock yourself out. Go ahead and remind me how dumb I am for fading Aaron Jones last year and fading A.J. Brown. I know. But yeah, man, that's all I got. And I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you're not subscribed to the channel already and you're really liking the content, please subscribe. It really helps. Hit that bell. Get notified when new videos are coming. I really appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you. Love you. Peace.